Hello, hello, hello.
And welcome to the Hildebrand Law Firm topic for today.
I'm Kirsten Hildebrand,
And I'm Matt Kaplan.
and today we're going to talk about something a little unusual, and that is keeping our information private. Now, who thought that that was even possible in this day and age?
Well, it's kind of possible. We always give it a try, but privacy actually, Kirsten, has been on the forefront of people's consciousness relatively recently. California passed a giant privacy law a few years ago. The entire European Union has a big privacy law. With everyone's information in the digital age being online, people have actually started to care about their information, where it goes, and keeping things private.
Well, and I think it's also within what context. So, for example, you might not want it to be so private that, say, you're getting married, or you've had a child, or you have a grandchild, or you're even retiring. But when it comes to somebody passing away, that might be a situation where you would want to keep things private because it can become extremely stressful to have the world kind of looking in on things that were before, even when we're talking about privacy, things that necessarily weren't out there that now will be because of potentially a probate being filed.
Exactly, and some things to consider. And I would just want to buttress this with I get a lot of young people in my office whenever I ask them, how important is it for you to keep your information private? Most young people are like, all my stuff's out there on the internet anyway. The internet is forever. I don't really care. That might be the case, and I think that's fair.
But that might be because they're young and they don't have a lot.
Exactly.
I think that once people start to acquire assets, then they change their mind relatively quickly because the more assets you have, the more likely you are to be the subject of either a lawsuit or a fraud attempt, people calling and asking for money, or even not fraudulent, but donation attempts and things like that.
Yeah, and people ask me all the time, well, why would my information be public anyway? And it's because in the great state of Wisconsin and in probably every other state in the country, they decided a long time ago that things that happen in court is going to be a public process. Think of it as the public square. You're going to go to the square, you're going to be judged by the judge, by a jury, whomever. And so think of that, but in the digital age. So everything that you file in the state of Wisconsin and probably in a lot of other states is going to be public. What does that include? That includes if you have heirs, their names are going to be on there. We're going to be able to look those up. You have creditors. This is the biggest one that people want to prevent. How many people want to pass away and just see, here's all my creditors? I don't want everybody to know how much I owe in student loans if I pass away before I'm going to be able to pay them off, which I probably will. And so all of that information, people like to keep that information private, but the big one is your kids. People want to keep that private.
Yes, yes, I would agree. And so, how do you avoid that? If we know that if you are going to go into probate, that all of this information is going to be out there, are there any good ways of dealing with that situation? I guess before we answer that question, let's also talk about some of the interesting ways that your information could be used if you do end up having to file for a probate. Well, I can tell a little story about a piece of litigation that we had in here recently. Um, Situation was mom had four children. The son who lives closest to mom for approximately 30 years after dad passed away never spoke to her, would not come by the house, wouldn't have anything to do with her. The other three children did interact with mom on a very consistent basis. So, about 15 years after dad passed away, mom goes into an attorney. So she's like maybe 65 years old at this time, goes into an attorney and says, I want to cut out the son who lives 5 miles away that never comes to see me. So the will was drawn up without this, I'll call him the bad son, without the bad son being in the will. That will sits around for another 15 years. Mom passes away, and now that will gets submitted to probate court. Guess who needs to be notified as to whether or not he wants to contest that will? Well, it is the bad son. So the bad son gets a letter in the mail from the court saying, hey, sign this document, please. It's called a waiver and release, and then we'll admit this will to probate without it being contested. Well, he looked at that document and said, aha, I finally have a way of getting back. And so what he did was hand wrote on a piece of paper, Dear Judge, I contest this will. Signed, bad son. Sends it in, and guess what? We are off to the races. And of course, our client decided that he was not going to give the bad son one single dime. At the end of the day, though, the other two children said, you know what? It's not worth it. We'll give him $15,000 apiece. So they gave him $15,000 apiece. The case ended. But that's a pretty good day, right?
Yeah.
Be able to get $30,000 from an estate that you were supposed to have nothing to do with, caused a lot of consternation and concern between all of the kids, and he gets away with it. So that's the sort of thing that, at least in my experience, a lot of people come to us to do trust because they may have a situation or a potential situation that there could be people who are not even interested, people like stepchildren or distant individuals or exes, that they don't want them to ever know when they've passed away because they are not including them in their estate plans. The only way to keep that private is to do something other than a will and go through the probate process.
Right. And also, a lot of things to consider could be siblings knowing someone's passed away, reading on a probate, oh, okay, here are all the creditors. Well, how did you let mom spend that kind of money?
Mm.
Where's mom's house? I thought she lived here. Now she lives somewhere else. You know, there's always that situation with the in-town kid and the out-of-town kid. In-town kid is handling everything for mom. Out-of-town kid, all they do is criticize the in-town kid for whatever they're doing is not good enough. And so, in order to avoid all of those situations, all of those questions, all of that, it's best for most people to not have this stuff be public. And especially too, this is just intimate information.
Mm.
You know, do you want to go out on your roof and scream and be like, here's all my family drama. La, look at what we have going on. It sucks. La. No, you never do that. That's why if you ever have an intimate conversation with somebody, you keep it private. And so that's really a big reason that a lot of people want to try to keep stuff like this, especially their most intimate things, private.
And I think also one of the other elements that we don't talk about enough is fraud. So there are certain points in time when an individual is more vulnerable to fraud. And I would say one of them is when they've passed away, because now their information is not necessarily being reviewed, and it's not being currently used by that individual. So you've heard of Social Security numbers getting stolen. You've heard of even Medicaid or Medicare numbers being stolen and used. You've heard of credit cards being stolen and used from deceased individuals. And so, if you want to ensure that deceased individuals are not going to have their whole private information taken and then used for improper purposes, to keep that private is also going to decrease the chances of that happening.
Right. And what's to stop a data broker from trolling all the state websites for anyone who files a probate, getting your information, selling that to whoever wants to have that information, and then all of a sudden your family is getting letters every single day from, oh, heard your dad died, we can sell his house. Oh, heard your dad had a ton of debts, we can help consolidate those. Oh, heard your dad had some kids out of the woodwork, oh, we can help you with that. Nothing's going to stop them from doing that. There's no privacy laws against that in most states. And so nothing's going to stop them from doing that. And so, in order to make sure that you make sure that doesn't happen, keep everything private.
I think those are really good ideas. And so, because we are interested in protecting your today and tomorrow, this is one of the reasons that we hope that you will consider coming in and doing your estate plan with us. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.